I mean, with the Chili Peppers, they literally had one tour, like No Girlfriends tour. Like it was very like old school back then. But with the Beastie Boys, we were all just friends, like no one was treating anyone like Yoko Ono. You didn't just have to be like pretty and quiet sitting there.
I'm Justin Jay, and this is The Plug. There's a handful of movie scenes from the late 1980s and early 90s that are instantly recognizable. Images that are forever cemented in pop culture. Judd Nelson's defiant fist pump at the end of The Breakfast Club, the pottery wheel scene in Ghost, or John Cusack dressed in a trench coat holding a boombox over his head in Say Anything. Our guest today starred opposite Cusack in that unforgettable moment, a breakout role that introduced her to a global audience. But behind her early success was a complicated path shaped by a turbulent teenage relationship with an older man battling addiction, the emotional fallout of being estranged from her famous musician father, and periods of self-destructive behavior. In her new book, Say Everything, she shares it all. From her on-screen crush on Keanu Reeves and River's Edge, to candid, sometimes provocative stories involving bold-faced names like Madonna, Matthew Perry, River Phoenix, and Gwyneth Paltrow. So what was it like growing up the daughter of 60s pop icon Donovan, the wife of a Beastie Boy, and the romantic lead in several classic films? We'll find out as we sit down for a chat with someone who was front and center for some of the most interesting cultural moments of the late 20th century. From her relationship with Anthony Kiedis of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, to the creatively charged LA art and music scene she inhabited during her marriage to Adam Horovitz. Today, actress, mother, artist, and author of a newly published memoir, Say Everything, Mrs. Ione Skye. Ione Skye, thank you so much for joining. It's a pleasure to get to chat with you. I'm excited about this.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for having me here.
So I guess, first off, I guess I want to just say congrats on your memoir, Say Everything. I burned through reading it in a single weekend, and it's really heartfelt, and it's honest, and it's filled with a whole lot of really intimate details and candid stories about a lot of bold-faced names. And I want to get to that in a second. But, first, this book it's so incredibly dense with details and descriptions from chapters of your life that are sometimes 30 or 40 years in the past. And, talk to me about the process of how you go about writing a book like this. I mean, did you have a journal to be able to recollect some of this stuff? Did you do interviews with people for these stories? Like, how do you start writing a memoir like this?
A few things. I have a really good long-term memory. I'm kind of the keeper of the memories of the family for some reason. And my grandmother was kind of like this. Like she would remember the shirt she was wearing or whatever you wore in the 30s. And also my emotional memory from those times is strong. And once you start, thinking about the memories, you can kind of draw on more of them and then building a kind of scene around them. So the emotion is true. A lot of the details are true, but then you have to build the kind of build it out. So That's even Googling. If it was in the 80s, I would Google what perfume did we like? Or, try to jog my memory. What restaurants did all the agents go to again? So there's Google. But also I liked writing when I was a kid, and some of the stories I was sort of writing in my head or writing down parts of even in journals, or just trying to turn part of my life into stories. So I was always a little obsessed with my own story, which I think helped.
Well, we recently had Moon Unit Zappa on the podcast to talk about her memoir from last year. And I didn't realize you two were friends until I started reading your book. And, what struck me is interesting is that there seem to be a lot of parallels between your stories. I mean, first off, just the way that you described the real social atmosphere of your house on Wilton Place. And it had this kind of constant stream of bohemian, creative people cycling through. Like, that really reminded me of how Moon described her house growing up. But, you really both explore these complicated relationships you had with your famous musician fathers, and, the longing and the emotional connection that largely went unfulfilled and then kind of really shaped your relationships later in life. And, I'm wondering, were those similarities something that you were aware of while you were writing this book, or are those just really common themes for kids who grew up in, 80s LA showbiz families?
Yeah, it's funny you should say that, because the ones that I drew a parallel in the story and in my life were Karis Jagger and Amelia Fleetwood, who, Mick Fleetwood and
Mick Jagger.
Mick Jagger. So I kind of was studying, especially Karis. I was and always intrigued with children of, like Griffin Dunn with Dominic Dunn. Like I think because I wanted to crack that shell. Like what studying someone else is sometimes easier than analyzing your own life. But with Moon, until you said that, it's like, oh, of course, like, duh. Like, she had a similar thing. But it must have been something that felt familiar. But always, they had their dad, like, in the house, usually. Like, and mine was, like, nowhere. So I was in a kind of another category. But I still must have felt, our lifestyles felt kind of similar, although I was obsessed with the Zappa house because, whenever it's new and somebody else's, it's always like so exciting.
Yeah. I mean, her dad was in the picture, but I think that's what's interesting about these two books is that was really a major theme of her book, is that he was physically around sometimes, but
right.
Emotionally,
Sure.
He wasn't. There was this really sad passage she was talking about, like, all she ever really wanted as a kid is just to have a Saturday morning in bed with her dad, It seemed like a very small ask that never really materialized.
I know. It's pretty unreal. But now it's a sad, like, that now that we're both parents, as a parent, you can understand not doing that. Like, on one hand, it makes you think, I can't even imagine ever ignoring my kid for a second or whatever. But on the other hand, you also touch those parts of you that can kind of relate, although it's wrong not to be involved. But you understand it a little too late after you've already had your childhood.
It's funny. The one major difference between the books is that she also had an affair with a much older musician that didn't end well. But she's very discreet about the identity, and she doesn't divulge their name. But in your book, you spill a lot of beans, and you talk a lot in depth, extremely candidly, about a lot of very famous people. And some of those characterizations aren't that flattering. And it's captivating to read, but I'm wondering if you had any trepidation while you were writing this.
Oh, yeah.
Because most of us have written that kind of intense email to somebody and then at the last minute decided to just leave it in the draft folder and never actually send it.
Yeah.
But you did send it. You published this book. And, when the final draft went to print and you knew the public was going to actually read this, what was that like? Was it terrifying, cathartic? Were there any elements of regret or embarrassment? What was going through your mind on the eve of this book's release?
Yeah. Of course, there's the main people like your parents and, those people that I gave the book to my mom and my brother early on in early drafts to just keep seeing how they were doing with it. But yeah, other people, believe it or not, I protected some people by toning some stuff down. And with Anthony Kiedis, he had already said everything. So in his own book, had he not, I wouldn't have said things like that. And I'm close with his mom, and so we had a conversation. It was interesting. She didn't read his book because he didn't want her to. So I was really worried about that. And we talked about it. But because Anthony had already said so many things, I thought about it a lot, but that was kind of the main one. And my father, I really feel protective of him and his legacy. So that was difficult. And other people, I don't know if it's just Anthony and my ex-husband is very private. So I really wanted to portray him, and that's what he is, an amazing person. So I think he I thought about it the whole time because I trust myself with myself at this point, and I felt like I could trust that I would be kind and understanding because I'm just like that and not bitter and not like, just very understanding. Like, I think several times I'm like, it wasn't Anthony's fault. I mean, as far as drug addiction wasn't his fault, but other stuff, I don't know. I think Anthony Kiedis got the hardest, and Madonna and Gwyneth, but that's very light. And also everybody's like, if you say, oh, Madonna was spicy, it's like, oh yeah, of course. And Gwyneth was a little bit like snotty, like, yeah. So I kind of, my dad, Anthony, but other people I actually protected sort of because I don't know, I think it was a different time and I didn't want to kind of throw them in a weird light.
Well, it's funny you said that because, cancel culture can be so unforgiving these days. And, personally, I really struggle with the idea of people being judged for past behavior through a lens of today's standards, But that said, you do talk a lot about your relationship with Anthony Kiedis and, the drugs and the jealousy and the cheating and the possessiveness. And, you were 16 or 17 years old at the time and he was 24 roughly.
Yeah.
There's a section of your book at the end where you're having this conversation with your adult daughter, and you kind of try and brush off the relationship as, that was a different time. And your daughter really pushes back and basically says, no, like at no time was that relationship ever appropriate. And was that one of the first instances where you kind of had a clear perspective on that relationship and the fact that it probably wouldn't be permitted or accepted today? I mean, did anybody else ever raise flags while you two were dating, or were the times really that different?
They were different. I think my mother had a hard time with it, but it was because his drug addiction was such a big deal that almost overshadowed an age difference. When it's you feel so mature. So at 17 or 16, I felt out of my league in this whole Chili Peppers scene in some ways because it was like they were older and it was a fast scene. But I also, my emotions, because you're just tied up with your own emotions, you don't think, oh, I'm too young. I mean, if Anthony wasn't still dating like young people, I would just say, well, once in a while, it happens. Of course, if it's like such a crazy age gap that it's like really inappropriate. But 24 is still pretty young. I mean, I still kind of think it's not right, but it's more also the behavior when you're young. And I think, just some of the unsafe sex, it's like, I'm just sort of like, what, why, but people, I don't know. People do things that aren't right. So the age gap stuff is still hard for me to remember. I was just doing, like I did the Drew Barrymore show and we were sort of talking about that. And you still kind of, you still have a hard time thinking that was a big issue when it just was all around you. And everyone seemed to be talking about the same things and feeling the same things. So you were just like, okay, you're 8 years older or whatever it was.
Have you had a conversation with Anthony or Adam since this book came out?
No. Anthony, I will see him over the years and it's always very nice. Honestly, when he did that making amends thing, it really helped. And it did something. Like it was so thorough and so, he was just so thoroughly owning what he did and feeling bad about it that actually I was like, okay, great, thank you. But so we don't have any hard feelings, but maybe he does now. But I don't know. I do feel like I was very caring about him. And then Adam is very, like I said, he's very private. And after Kathleen Hanna he was like, or he said, I'm with someone, we basically saw each other like 2 times or talked once on the phone. So I haven't really been in touch.
Yeah, I mean, you struck a really delicate balance in this book between being honest and candid, but not vindictive or salacious. You know what I mean? It's an honest reading of, I'm sure, what must have been some difficult chapters in your life.
Yeah. I didn't want to be too sad. Like I was sort of surprised. A lot of people are like crying at the end, and they're like, it's so amazing. The response has been incredible. As the best response I could have ever hoped for is happening with this, which doesn't always happen with projects. I'm sure, as you know, like some you love and like it doesn't resonate with many other people except a few. This one, I'm like, it couldn't be, it's like exactly what I hoped. But I didn't want to be too heavy, but people are like, oh, it's so sad. I'm like, I didn't want to make people sad, but I definitely didn't. I'm not really a bitter person, but I guess there's a disarming quality to it, which is good and bad.
You had a great quote in your book describing the time when you were with Adam, and you wrote that you felt like you two had just the perfect amount of famous. And, you were able to go to glamorous house parties filled with celebrities, and you owned a beautiful house in the hills, and you could fly to Europe with your brother Donovan and, mingle with supermodels, but you still had some degree of privacy and anonymity. And, paparazzi and tabloid culture hadn't completely spiraled out of control yet. And, you'd already been exposed to fame secondhand through your mother and through some of your friends who had famous parents. But I'm wondering, what surprised you the most about the experience of becoming famous yourself? Like, what's the biggest misconception that the public has about fame that you had to actually confront?
I mean, one thing is that like movie sets are so, I love movie sets, but at the end of the day, you feel like you've been camping. I don't know why. You just feel like disgusting. And it's so funny because you're treated beautiful. I love it because someone puts your makeup on, people bring you coffees, you have your own trailer to chill in, and you have this chair pulled up. Everyone's like doing things for you. So that's partly why I think actors are like children, because you're treated like these special children. But I think partly also why I didn't have a lot of attention was I didn't like, it's not that I didn't realize I was famous, but I didn't really realize I would forget I was an actress. Like I was always very just in the moment. And because I'm kind of an artist, like a painter, a writer, like I've always been that kind of artist. Not to say I don't absolutely love being in the spotlight and having attention. And the older I get, it's like the more I realize that I loved it and I do like it. But I think partly I think that actors, every new job, they feel, even you hear Meryl Streep, like, will I be able to do a good job? Like, I think the misconception is you think, and I'm sure a lot of people have this with other jobs, that other people know how to do it. And that there's some door that they know how to open. And then as you get older, so I viewed all the suits as one thing, the executives as one thing, and then all the actors who were a little more famous knew so much more than me how to do the business. And now at this point, I go to dinner at someone's house and then I'm like, oh my God, that my friend's a showrunner. Like I used to view, or that person's a producer in the music business. And I used to think everybody knew, and now I realize, oh, that's how they do it, and that makes sense, and it just all makes sense now. I was very just like in a fog and sort of like didn't know, how people did things. So I think a lot of the misconception is that I guess, everybody knows what they're doing and different things like that.
Yeah. Well, after you and Adam divorced, you wrote about how you had this tattoo of his name altered to read from Adam to Madam. And you write about how it, quote, it symbolized being your own woman, someone who calls her own shots, but who follows her heart without shame or apology. And, that passage really struck out to me. It's almost contradictory because there's a lot of contrition and sadness in this book. And, you talk about becoming romantically involved with these other people and how that kind of ultimately helped to end your marriage. So it seems like the way that you describe that tattoo, it feels somewhat at odds with the broader theme of like some of the remorse that runs through this book. Is that a fair reading? Yeah. Did I get that right?
Yeah. I mean, it's so true. Like so much stuff in all the edits of the book, I'm so into being like authentic and having things feel correct. Like it just like I combed over stuff so many times, like does this feel right? Is this right? Does this feel good still? And on one hand, you're absolutely right. It's contradictory. On one hand, I was in the house we bought. I was on my own. So on one hand, I was becoming my own person. You're with yourself in your own story, and it's dictated kind of by your own experience. And then I get very dictated by who I'm dating. Like, how are they feeling? And how are they doing? And are we together? Like, very much like, I've been listening to this Dominic Dunn book. It's sort of about the O.J. Simpson trials. And there's this thing about what was her name? Nicole Simpson.
Nicole Brown Simpson.
Yes, exactly. Like, she couldn't not be with somebody. And so, like, that's why she kind of kept going back to him. And I definitely can relate to that. But that period, I had periods where I was on my own, and it was so, for lack of a better word, beautiful. And I was alone in my place, just like back to what I was like as a kid when I would just be dreaming in my room. And I had this house, and I was sort of like painting and on my own. And so, yes, I was like, I was becoming, the madam was sort of representing just like being with myself again and not a couple. But then I'd go back to being completely lost again. Like, the book does, I didn't want to mention love addiction because I hate those terms, but it is a lot about that kind of thing, like being only feeling good if you're dating someone. So you're right. There was a huge contradiction because I don't, all of a sudden then it's like, and then I was good forever.
Yeah. Well,
but I'd also never wanted the book to, like writing the epilogue I struggle with because I didn't want to be like, and now I know how to live and I'm amazing. Because I always, I don't like when people say, I'm a life coach, I've figured it out. I'm like, really?
Well, I guess the contradiction that I spotted was it's such a candid book in so many ways, and it's so self-reflective. But just that term, following your heart, it seemed like kind of a euphemism for having affairs, which is ultimately what really destroyed a lot of your relationships. That's what seemed contradictory to me.
Oh, I didn't mean like to follow, I didn't mean now I'm gonna, the marriage was such a constriction and now I get to be with who I want to be. That's not what I meant by that.
Yeah. So I'll switch gears and lighten it up for a second. I have to get your take on the Beastie Boys because, the era when you first met Adam, it was one of the most influential periods of their career. And, everything that I've read and all the stories that I've heard about G-Sun Studios, this rotating cast of insanely creative people that came through, to me, it felt similar to almost the closest thing that our generation had to like an Andy Warhol's factory, and you had Spike Jonze, Mike Mills, Money Mark, Grand Royal Magazine was headquartered there. And it seemed like it wasn't just a recording studio. It was like this clubhouse or like a creative lab. And I'm curious what that was like for you to get to be a part of that. Because, historically, recording studios and musicians' wives haven't always mixed so well. And I'm wondering, did you feel that tension ever? Or were you able to carve out your own creative space within that world?
Oh, yeah. No, there was no tension. I mean, with the Chili Peppers, they literally had one tour, like no girlfriends tour. Like, it was very like old school back then. But with the Beastie Boys, we were all just friends, like, Mario Caldato and Mark Nishida were still friends. And it was just this big community a crossover with New York people like the Biz Markie or Q-Tip. And we were just all friends. Like, I practically lived at the studio just because it felt comfortable and good. And also Adam and I were like so enmeshed. And same with, like Tamara and Mike D were, it wasn't, no one was treating anyone like Yoko Ono. And you didn't just have to be like pretty and quiet sitting there. And Tamara was directing and I was acting, and I don't know, it was just all and I did little stuff for, the magazine. They had the magazine Grand Royal there. And then there was also the X Girl and Extra Large, and there was a store on Vermont and Los Feliz. It was just all very fluid I don't know if that's the right word. Anyway, it just was like a bunch of friends. And Adam Yauch he was directing, or then he was like really into snowboarding or then skateboarding. So he built a ramp. And then there was like DFL, this punk band that were crossover people, and they were recording there, and Adam was in that DFL. So anyway, it was all very just like this. Yeah, it didn't feel.
Did it feel special and significant at the time, or it was just those are your friends and you're just being creative?
I mean, for sure, like there was always already like the Beastie Boys were established, obviously, and some, other bands were already established, but it felt exciting, and I felt like this was the coolest crew you could be involved in. And I think everyone was aware that this was super fun, and it works because there's I don't know if it was Mike D or Yauk or which was the Paul McCartney of the group, but you need probably Mike D and Yauk and to a certain extent. But if no one was doing anything and Adam Horovitz would have been that, but he got to be so there's an ambition that.
Yeah, I want to finish that thought. Adam got to be the George?
Well, because Mike D was like sort of the businessman role eventually in a way. And then Adam Yauk would become so obsessed with whatever he was into. If he was into acid, he did it for 1 year. If he was doing the music videos, he did it like super, super hardcore. And if someone was bringing in, a genre or something, there was the excellence and the like, they could see it all the way through. And then Mike D was sort of being a bit of a leader, but not really. And so Adam was just as ambitious, but he could kind of, go with it. I mean, not to say he didn't bring in his things. All I'm saying is, yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that.
That's a really interesting, don't know where you're going. So go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying like, it's always trying to analyze like who's kind of making this happen. But I think it's pretty equal. I guess what I'm saying is it feels like everyone's just creative and having fun. But for sure, there's some organization going on. You know what I mean?
So I want to get back to life on a movie set again. And, earlier in your career, you had this on-screen romance with Keanu Reeves, and you were understandably smitten with him. And, he gave you some really helpful perspective and talked about how the long hours and the creative intensity during the filming of a movie can be intoxicating, but oftentimes those on-set crushes, they're not real.
Yeah.
And, I've always been curious about the idea of actors falling for each other on set. And I always imagined it's a bit like having a fling when you're on vacation. It's like those relationships are so context specific, and rarely do they survive the return to real life.
Yeah.
But, on a film set, it must be so emotionally confusing to spend weeks pretending to be deeply intimate with someone, but only until the director yells cut. And I mean, I guess that's the definition of acting. But, from an outside perspective, I'm actually surprised that co-stars don't have affairs more often. I mean, what is that experience like?
Well, it's, yeah, for sure. I mean, there are just cases where I remember doing this. It was funny. It was this indie, and there was a love triangle, and Connie Britton it was one of her first things, and we both had the love triangle, and she was like, "How are you making it look like you're so into this person? Because I'm like not feeling it at all." And I was like, "Because it's called acting. You have to like." If you have somebody that you can really vibe with, or if they're giving you a lot, or if they're hitting the beats. But I had an acting teacher who was like, that's not always going to happen. And you still have to tell the story. And it's that interesting dance between like, you can't have a crazy reaction if someone's like not doing what they need to do. But if you have to go through something, you're going to have to bring it. So sometimes there's no chemistry, and it's the opposite, where you're just like, ugh, or you're uncomfortable, and then you just have to figure out how to do it because it's a job. But when you're young, especially, and someone's like charismatic, I mean, actors usually have a bit of charisma. It's like incredibly difficult to be so close to somebody and just hanging around and odd out. It's true. It's just all of that stuff. It's just very difficult, and being very creative. Like I once did this movie where I played a violinist, and I had to do sort of the choreography with a professional classical violinist. And I was like when I do this scene, it was Dermot Mulroney who actually can play the cello, and Martha Plimpton and I had to pretend to play the violin. But it's like so much chemistry. And she was like, oh, the classical world is like, people are having sex all the time. I don't know if that's true or not, but she was like, it's just like the creativity also makes you really open. And creativity and sexuality, it's like they sometimes feel like they're similar things sometimes. So yeah, it can be very confusing, especially on location.
Let's talk about the times when you do have that insane chemistry with your co-star. I mean, is it next to impossible for that to not bleed into real life?
Yeah, I mean, that's why there's like that trope or whatever, that thing about actors massaging each other. Because I'm sure some people are like, how do I like do this appropriately and like get involved, but not get involved. But when you get older and you start having families, or you obviously, or you're, also that's something too. Sometimes you do a job and you both, well, with say anything, I had a boyfriend, Anthony, and John Cusack had his first girlfriend. So it was just like off the table. And as crazy as I was never really, I really think maybe once I fooled around with someone who was taken. I just like, for someone who's a cheater, that was off the table. Like if they're with someone, they're taken.
That's a strange line in the sand to draw, but I respect it.
I know. Go figure. I don't know why. But yeah, I guess everybody has their specific things that whatever. Yeah, because some women like married men. There's like a thing about it or something. But I don't know why I wasn't like that. But I think that it's really difficult, that you're lonely. Sometimes you're lonely and you're away in Canada and it's winter and I don't know. You're just like, it's just very hard sometimes.
It seems like just such a unique, specific environment that it would foster these relationships. I mean, and the times, or if there was a time when you kind of did lean into a romance while you're on set, did it transfer offset? I mean, was it real, or was it really something about just the energy of being part of that process?
Yeah, I mean, I think no, I can't think of any situation where it transferred. I mean, with River and I, River Phoenix and I maybe did we kiss once? Yeah, we kissed, but we never went all the way. But we had attraction and chemistry, but it just stayed a long, long friendship with that same lovely, just like attraction, but like mainly a friendship. So that transferred. It's funny when you do films, the certain people you become friends with, and you think when you're young, oh, we're going to be a crew. I'm going to know these people forever. And then cut to 30 years later, you're like, oh, I still am friends with this one costume designer, but it's random. It's so random. But yeah, I've never had it transfer. But some people do.
Yeah. You wrote about your brother, Donovan Leitch, and how when you were in your early teens, you weren't so much jealous of his success as much as you were of his sense of clarity and his sense of direction of what he wanted to be and where he wanted to go early on. But, you get cast in a movie, and I would imagine the filming of your first movie must kind of feel abstract and unreal. But, when you finally saw the movie completed and you're in a dark theater and you see your name on the screen for the first time, do you remember what that felt like? I mean,
I do.
Did you feel that sense of clarity and purpose immediately and know that that's what you wanted to do?
The weird thing is the truest story, like the truest thing is, it was surreal when I first saw it, and I was out of my body. I couldn't see, is this a good movie? Was I good? When I saw, everything was like, it was like being on acid. It sounded so loud. My name looked weird. It was just very surreal, and I was quite numb. And then the second time, that was a sort of smaller screening. And then the second time, which is in the book, the sentiment of I wanted my name to be there forever was true. And that was like, instead, more than just I have a purpose, it was, I want to keep doing this forever. Like, I mean, I don't want to go back to high school. I loved the film set. I loved the whole experience. I loved being in the theater with the cast, watching the movie. So yeah, that time I was like, whatever this is, please keep going. But it wasn't so much that I was conscious of, I'm an actor now and I need to keep acting. That came a little later, to be honest.
So the pursuit of acting as a career came a little bit later, but that feeling of seeing yourself on screen, I mean, that was magical from the start.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, I did love also, yeah, I mean, when you're young and beautiful as well, I was like, wow, and some of the scenes, I was like, oh my God, I did it. I can do this. And then, it gets tricky as an actress when you're older. Now I watch myself and I'm like, ooh, I'm older. But apart from that whole being older, but I feel like better is the wrong word. I don't like using the word better, but I'm definitely maybe more versatile or something. You do kind of get better as you go along in a certain way. You lose certain qualities, but, I think, as far as the craft, you as you get older, it can get better.
Well, getting back to the theme of aging, for listeners of a certain age, Gen Xers, there's a handful of movies from the 80s and early 90s that they're just a part of the fabric of our youth, whether it's Breakfast Club or Say Anything. And my wife is a makeup artist, and she's been working with Molly Ringwald on and off for the past couple of years. And, Molly's wonderful. She's in her 50s now. She's a grown woman.
Yeah.
And, my wife is describing how every once in a while, when she's doing her makeup, Molly will be talking and she'll just say something a certain way. And my wife will just see this glimmer of that 16-year-old Molly that we all grew up watching. I mean, she's still in there somewhere. And, from an outside observer, it's really surreal to experience this clash of one's memory and then seeing the actual passage of time. And I'm wondering, as an actress, you've had this rare opportunity to have your adolescence preserved on film and to kind of have a frozen version of yourself out in the world forever. And when you look back at yourself looking so young like that, is it difficult to look at? Is it jarring? Or do you feel more of a sense of warm nostalgia? What's your relationship to those early films that you starred in?
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, sometimes I look back and I think, yeah, my voice is higher even though I'm a woman, and usually it's boys that have men and boys that, their voice changes, but girls' voices kind of changes and my voice is higher. I have less confidence in a certain way. But yeah, and I just seem so young. But, and I marvel at, I was doing all of that and that's so wild. But the hard part is, now I think I'm going to look that way. And I don't know if this is for everybody, but my mind is stuck on, oh, my arms look that way, my face looked that way, my whatever, legs look that way. Like, it's kind of hard to see yourself now. And that's the shock, but maybe that's just a lot of older people. I look in the mirror and I think I'm going to look, 20 or 30. And then but I don't know if that's because I've been filmed quite a bit. But so it's kind of getting used to me now. But yeah, sometimes I just think, also I just am like, wow, I was so hard on myself. You hear this a lot, that even when someone was beautiful, I didn't think I was as beautiful as I was some of the time, which that is sort of always a bit annoying because you're like, you could have enjoyed it more.
I guess that's what I was wondering. So rather than just looking at this young, beautiful version of yourself and feeling sorrow because you're an older woman now, are there things that you were insecure and didn't feel comfortable in your skin about when you were young, and you look at yourself now and you are actually more confident and it's easy to look at those old films?
Yeah, I mean, I also have to say I'm not only in sorrow. Like, I also like how, I like the changes too. So it's not only just like wishing I looked 25, because I like being older and elegant, and there's new things that are really, really nice.
Of course.
But anyway, yeah, there's a whole thing around weight, that's ridiculous because, I mean, on one hand, I guess I don't even know. It's just definitely programming. And also I was delusional at certain parts, and fortunately didn't have an extreme issue with any, weight stuff like some people have. But I definitely was tortured a lot of the time.
Aside from just the physical differences, do you enjoy looking at yourself in those old movies? Are you critical of your performances, or does it make you feel like just in a very warm, nostalgic way of, I guess what I'm getting at is it's so rare for a person to have such a expansive document of them at a certain age of their life,
Well, you hear there's sort of two types of actors. Some who maybe three. Some who never watch anything, some who always watch everything and study it and love it and watch it, and then some who watch some and not others. And for me, I'm usually don't watch something I'm in. I even would skip the screening, and like if you had to go because it was a big job, which I think I've heard of. You do the red carpet, go out to dinner, come back and do the Q&A, or come back and go to the after party or whatever you're doing. Because I find it really hard. It takes some films, it takes like 2 decades or jobs where I can then go back and watch myself. Some movies like River's Edge, for some reason, and I don't know if it's just the movie is so atmospheric and good. And like I was in Zodiac, David Fincher's film, and it's just like a couple scenes, but that movie is so amazing atmospherically that I get like so lost in the movie that I'm just part of the movie.
Yeah.
I can watch it like where I'm just one of the characters. And the same with River's Edge, kind of. I mean, but Say Anything took a long time for me to watch objectively. I don't know if this is true for other actors. I was just put right back into the experience of it. So I was just going through the kind of how I felt that day. And I really enjoyed that day. And I'm more, which is kind of a gift in a way, because it's like a time machine. I can remember what neighborhood we filmed it.
It helps with recall.
Yeah, exactly. But a lot of things I don't watch. I don't know, or I have a podcast, Weirder Together. I'll do a plug for some reason. But anyway, the first year I listened to everyone and I was just like luxuriating to an egoic point. Like, I love my podcast. And now I'm just like, I'm going through a phase of like, ooh, I don't want to listen to my podcast. So I guess it's like depends.
Is there anything in this book that you regret that you included, or that you wish that you would have included?
I mean, there's so many stories that didn't make it, but I'm still happy with how it all came out.
Was there something that you got a lot of blowback for that you wish, in retrospect, you could have left out?
No, I mean, not yet, hopefully, but no, so far so good. I still think I feel conflicted about writing about Adam at all, because he's so private. Even though I think he comes off as great, I still feel like that was difficult and still is, because I just think I want to respect his privacy, but also we're entertainers. Everyone can write a memoir if they want, and hopefully I don't think it's damaging. But yeah, I'm conflicted. I feel bad, like Anthony's mom. I still feel like she's so sweet, but it's like I'm glad I did it, but I still wrestle with some of that.
We always like to end the podcast by asking our guests to plug something that they aren't directly involved in, that they feel isn't getting enough attention. It could be a book, a movie, an artist, a cause. Is there something that you've been really into lately that you want to give a little extra shine to?
I've been listening to this musician, William Tyler, who's like, I don't want to say modern country because I don't know why my punk side would be like, country? You can't say country. But now this generation doesn't, the genres of music are not as,
siloed.
Yeah. William Tyler, basically any of his albums, he's just one of those like guitar player, musicians that's just like otherworldly, like he's young-ish and he's William Tyler. So any of William Tyler's albums, just put it on in the house while you're in the house. It's just like every time my husband, Ben Lee, would put it on, I would be like, who is this, for so long? And he's like, William Tyler. Well, it's one of those things you're just like, just on a visceral level. And he's, a little popular, but not, he's no hugely popular person. But yeah, William Tyler.
All right, I'll check that out. Well, Ione, I want to just say congrats one more time on this book. Say Everything is available now in bookstores, and it's a really compelling read. It's got a lot of really intimate stories and reflections, but it's also just really entertaining, and it's got some great behind-the-scenes glimpses into 80s and 90s Hollywood. So definitely go check it out. And on a side note, I'm friends with Tatiana von Furstenberg as well, and so her name was in this book a lot. So I'd actually reached out to her for some backstory, and she just had wonderful things to say about you as a friend and as a mother. So I wanted to give her a shout out.
Yeah, we're still close as ever. I'm so happy. Now we've known each other so long, but I'm like such a fan of hers, all around. I just I'm all about her.
Well, it was a pleasure getting to chat with you, and I wish you all the best, and hopefully our paths will cross again sometime soon.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, and a huge thanks to today's guest for dropping in. If you enjoyed this episode, do us a favor and take a minute to rate, review, follow, or subscribe. This episode of The Plug contains original theme music by Andrew Van Weingarten and Dan Drohan. Mixing and sound design by Matt Boynton at Ultraviolet Audio, logo and branding by Italic at italic-studio.com, and you can check out my photography at justinj.com. Thanks again, and be sure to check out the archive and tune in for future conversations.